The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Good evening, everyone. This is Sharon Rondo, editor of the Post and Email, an electronic newspaper which covers corruption in government exclusively. And I'm very pleased and honored to be guest co-host with Michael Volin of where'sobama's-birthcertificate.com. Mike has been studying the Obama identity eligibility issue for longer than I have, actually 5+ years now, and he's done a great job putting together a sheriff's kit and urging people to visit their congressmen and state legislators and anyone they can tell about the evidence that the cold case posse gathered regarding Obama's fraudulent birth certificate and other identity issues. I again thank Michael so much for inviting me to co-host, and I'm very pleased to let the audience know that we have a very special guest, Martha Trowbridge. She's an investigative researcher, and she's done quite a bit of work on AKA, as she calls him, Obama's background, identity, his growing up years, things that we really still have a lot of questions about. And so this will be a very exciting show, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Martha now. Martha, thank you for being on with us.
Oh, thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Mike, for all you do for America.
And Martha has requested, and it's a great idea, for us to lead off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So everyone in the audience who'd like to join in, we can just stop our chatting and typing and whatever else we're doing, and we'll just take a moment to say, I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America,
and to the republic
which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with and justice
for all.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Martha, you and I have known each other for a little while now, and we've shared lots of research and lots of time with what we have both discovered, and you have done some unique work, I think, out there on the web, on your website. Would you like to tell us about your website and how long it's been up and what kind of information people can find there?
Okay, yes, I will. Thank you very much. Are you talking to me, Sharon?
I was talking to Martha, but Mike, you should have a chance too.
No, go right ahead. I'm having trouble with my cell phone connection. Go right ahead, Martha. I'm going to try to reconnect with a better connection. Go right ahead, Martha.
Okay. Well, back in April 2011, I got a call actually from the Holy Spirit to do this work, and I telephoned my dear trusty colleague, Rush, and said, Eric, would you like to work on a project with me? And he said, sure. And we didn't really know what we were going to find out. We started with a few questions about who is the person who presents as Barack Obama and where does he come from and what's the truth about him. So Eric and I worked together full-time for about 6 weeks, and then he had other responsibilities, and I just forward without him from that point, mid to late May 2011. But immediately when we started our research, we were able to place the woman who is presented as Stanley Ann Dunham at the immediate aftermath of Malcolm X's assassination. It was on some film footage that was taken that day, February 21st, 1965. And so from there, everything emanated. We tried for several months to get the mainstream media to look at our research, and of course we were stonewalled everywhere we went. So finally, by September 29, 2011, we decided to go forward and started the blog Terrible Truth at WordPress. And that eventually evolved into the blog that I currently maintain, which is terribletruth.marthatrowbridgeradio.org, which is a subscriber blog.
You know, I've been on your website quite a bit and found the articles fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I know you wanted to talk about a number of things in regard to what you've researched and found and published regarding AKA Obama's background. It's fascinating to think that he could very well have been born under a different name in a totally different city and town or city and state than what we've been led to believe. The first thing I know you wanted to talk about was contextualizing, quote unquote, Obama. Who is the real Barack Hussein Obama to?
Well, that's probably going to take quite a few years to completely define, but we do know certain things. First of all, what we were told, and this has been absolutely confirmed with Sheriff Joe's cold case posse, that much of the data, if not all of the data he presented as documentary evidence of his identity has been proven to be forged and fraudulent. And Sharon, you probably would like to itemize what those forged and fraudulent documents are, the birth certificate, service registration.
Yes, the long form birth certificate. And I know Mike Zullo, who's lead investigator of the cold case posse, has written in his 57-page affidavit, which has been submitted with the Alabama Supreme Court case, that the short form also is a forgery. I know sometimes we don't mention that one because it was posted up on the White House website, but the short form, the long form, as you said, which was posted April 27, 2011, and the selective service registration form, which actually the Post and Email received as a result of a FOIA request, which was back in 2010. So we have a copy of that, which was later proclaimed a forgery because they found that the numbers were expressed as 4 digits back then without any exception, and the number date that's stamped on Obama's or AKA Obama's says 80 rather than 1980. So they're sure that that also is a forgery. And other than that, we don't really know of any other documentation, I don't believe. I know there's missing microfiche and all kinds of other mysteries that haven't been solved, but I don't believe he's ever presented anything else that is represented as an original document.
Well, that can really validate his identity, which led me to the question, why? I mean, what Commander Zullo and the cold case posse have been examining the evidence, and I've been looking more for the motivation of why. So when Eric and I first started, we put aside all of the propaganda, all of the lies, all of the deceit, and we started from scratch. We very quickly understood that Malcolm X and this girl in the video, who at the time immediately we just assumed was Stanley Ann Dunham, and I came to understand that was also a synthetic identity, that the person who presents as Barack Obama II was actually the child of these two. The Joanne Newman, whom I'll discuss in a while, is the identity of his mother from approximately the late 1950s through at least 1965, November 65. We can definitely attach that identity to her. She's had multiple identities, and we'll get into that more in the show. So, stepping aside...
Can I interrupt here for a minute?
Sure.
I'd like to play something from 1965 that has to deal with 1965. I don't know if you've ever heard this, Martha, and I'd like to play it for the audience. This may fit right into what you're saying, and it's 2 minutes and 43 seconds
Something
long,
happened
and
in
just pay
Birmingham
attention.
that sent out what Bobby Kennedy called ripples of hope all around the world. Something happened when a bunch of women decided we're going to walk instead of ride the bus after a long day of doing somebody else's laundry and looking after somebody else's children. When men who had PhDs were working as Pullman porters decided that's enough, and we're going to stand up despite the risks for our dignity and our respect, that sent a shout across oceans. So that my grandfather began to imagine something different for his son. And his son, who grew up herding goats in a small village in Africa, could suddenly set his sights a little higher and suddenly believe that maybe a black man in this world had a chance. And what happened in Selma, Alabama and Birmingham also stirred the conscience of the nation. And it worried folks in the White House who said, we're battling communism. How are we going to win the hearts and minds all across the world if right here in our own country, John, we're not observing the ideals that are set forth in our Constitution? We might be accused of being hypocrites. So the Kennedys decided we're going to do an airlift. We're going to go out to Africa, and we're going to start bringing young Africans over to this country and give them scholarships to study so that they can learn what a wonderful country America is. And this young man named Barack Obama got one of those tickets and came over to this country. And he met this woman whose great-great-great-great-grandfather had owned slaves. But she had a different idea. There's some good craziness going on because they looked at each other and they decided, we know that in the world as it has been, it might not be possible for us to get together and have a child. But something's stirring across the country because of what happened in Selma, Alabama, because some folks are willing to march across a bridge. And so they got together and Barack Obama Jr. was born. So don't tell me I don't have a claim on Selma, Alabama. Don't tell me I'm not coming home when I come to Selma, Alabama. I'm here because somebody must for free. I'm here because y'all sacrificed for me. I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Well, there you have it. I've got a lot of complaints from the chat room that I've been playing it, and I just want to let the chat room know I'm going to keep on playing it. It's Barack Obama's own words. March 25th, 1965 is when the March on Selma occurred, and according to Barack Hussein Obama, in his own words, because of the march, that's when his parents met, and that's why Barack Hussein Obama is here today. There's a video associated with that. I'm not making this up, and I will keep on playing it. Have you heard that before, Martha?
I have, and that is what's considered in a court of law documentary evidence. And here's the thing. There are so many things going on in that clip there. First of all, there is a connection between his parents and Selma, Alabama, but it's not Stanley N. Dunham and Barack Obama. It's actually Malcolm X and Joanne Newman in Selma, which I have not yet published, which I will put on my list to get published in the near future. It was not the date of the march in 1965. It was prior to that. In fact, it was not very long prior to Malcolm's assassination that they were in Selma, Alabama together. However, young Bari, his birth identity is Bari M. for Malik Shabazz, son of Malcolm X Shabazz and Joanne Newman. This young man, this baby, was born 5.5 years prior, not 5.5, probably 5.25 years prior to this famous Selma romance of his mother and father. So as you hear there, which is typical of the spin, you know what spin is, taking truth and spinning it in whatever direction you want for whatever purpose you intend, there are kernels, as in a lot of what AKA Obama tells us. There are kernels, there are nuggets of truth, but the problem is he embeds them in a whole basket of lies, and that's what you're hearing there in that speech.
Yeah, it's really incredible what he says there. And he's speaking with a very phony Southern accent and saying y'all. He doesn't say that on television. He doesn't say that when he's talking about Obamacare. So he really changes his accent and his whole demeanor, the way he speaks, depending on his audience. He just wanted the audience to embrace him. So he kind of, as you said, spun this story. And even though there may be a connection to Selma, Alabama with him and his parents, he puts it in a different context, in a totally different scenery and time and year, and he just makes it be whatever he thinks people might want to hear, and which will endear him to them. So, which gets us into some of the other things that you did want to talk about. You said that he's deliberately devious. Would this clip from March 25th, 1965, would that fall into that category, Martha?
Oh, absolutely. But, Sharon, if I may back up, there was one other point I want to make about that audio and video clip.
Sure.
He mentions that the person known as Barack Obama from Kenya came here on the Kennedy airlift. That has been categorically contradicted. To suit their narrative, they claim that Barack Obama from Kenya, who is the son of the Mau Mau revolutionary Obama from the early 1950s, which we all know about, who is one of Malcolm X's idols, by the way, he claims that young Barack came here on a Kennedy airlift. This is categorically false. In fact, there's a book by an author, I believe, whose last name is Schachtman, S-H-A, if I remember correctly, on the Kennedy airlift that suddenly materialized after a.k.a. Obama went out with this speech. The Kennedys did not get involved in the airlift until after 1959. It is absolutely impossible for Barack Obama from Kenya to be on that plane, excuse me, the Kennedy plane, if he was supposed to arrive in Honolulu, Hawaii in the fall of 1959. So that's another big, fat lie.
Wow.
However,
which then leads us to ask, is anything he's told us true? And I think people are finding out with Obamacare that there's an awful lot that he said about keeping your own health plan and everything, not to digress, but there's an awful lot he said now that the world has had to admit is not true. So that leads us back to your research and whether or not anything we know about him publicly is actually accurate. Now, can you tell us a little bit about Uncle Fred? I know you've written a lot about him in context with his real family, as you've reported it. Who was Uncle Fred, and does he have an alias, or is this his real name?
Well, what's interesting is, from what I've seen, and again, I, as one person, can't possibly look at everything or be everywhere simultaneously, but just from what I've seen in the past 2.5 years, if I may just back up to make the connection between a.k.a. Obama and Fred Newman, when Eric and I were studying this girl, this young woman, in the video of the news clip after, right outside the Audubon Ballroom the day Malcolm was assassinated in February of 1965. From there, we were studying, and one place we went was to the publicly accessible FBI file. And in that file, I found his mother's eulogy to Malcolm X that was published in the New York Amsterdam News, which was a black newspaper in New York City, edited by Jimmy Booker, who was dubbed the man who knew Malcolm X best. So here's a white girl reportedly working in the classified advertising department in an all-black newspaper. So anyway, this tribute to a black man is included in Malcolm X's FBI files. So that got my curiosity, and I said, why? And it was written by Joanne Newman. So this is where I first saw her name. And come to find out, as in my travels and my work, within, this was in, let me see, April, I believe, of 2011, when I made this discovery of the Tribute to a Black Man eulogy published in the Amsterdam News. In March, actually, Mike, in March of 1965, all of a sudden, guess who pops onto the radar but this really ultra-radical, he is left of left, socialist activist who goes by the name Fred Newman. So you put two and two together as time goes on. Anyway, I'm sorry, Sharon, what was your specific question? How did I stumble upon Fred Newman?
Yes, well, you're actually telling it. You're answering it exactly, so go right ahead.
Oh, okay. So, excuse me. As I'm researching Joanne Newman and what she's all about, I come to, pardon me, I just need to get a sip of water. Excuse me. I come across this very colorful, you really need to do your own reading about Fred Newman. I could never adequately convey the character, the personality of Fred Newman. But so then I started researching him. And as time went on, I started noticing so many interconnections between a.k.a. Obama and Fred Newman. First person, Al Sharpton, who is, and in fact, I'm skipping ahead a bit here, Sharon, and maybe we can come back to this. But
Sure.
Al Sharpton was somebody who was mentored, groomed, cultivated, whatever, by Newman, and You know what Al Sharpton's role has been in this whole Obama story, and also Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who's been very, very connected with the Obama presidency, and he's, as you know, leading that initiative against the guns, the mayors, what is it, Sharon, the Mayors Against Guns or something initiative?
Right.
And
There is a group, yeah.
And the third person who's notable, who's connected with Fred Newman, I call him Uncle Fred, is Sonia Sotomayor, which people will recognize was the first Supreme Court nominee of President A.K.A. Obama for the Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor. So all of these interconnections started popping up, and it really got my attention.
Wow. Wow.
And Fred also claims to have been raised in the Bronx in that era. He claims to have, actually, Fred is reportedly deceased in July 2011. So I don't know whether I should use past or present tense when I refer to him. At least he's been reported dead. We can assume he is, but with this group, we don't quite know, do we? He claims to have attended Stuyvesant High School, which is also the high school, as you may know, of Eric Holder and David Axelrod. So there are all kinds of overlaps here, just to name a few.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.